The Subaru's engine coughed and wheezed like a dying animal as I rolled into Copper Center, Alaska. The October wind slipped through the cracked seal of the windshield sharp enough to bite through denim. My breath fogged the glass as dusk crawled down from the mountains, swallowing the little town clinging to the Richardson Highway. I was 29 years old, broke, and running out of road. $800 to my name, a borrowed car from a cousin who'd stopped answering my calls, and a crumpled envelope in the glove box that held everything I hadn't already gambled away in Reno. The highway stretched behind me like an old scar carved across endless forest and ice. Spruce trees loomed tall and black against a bruised sky, their tips shivering in the wind. I'd been driving 18 hours straight, surviving on gas station coffee, and that peculiar brand of desperation that convinces you geography can fix the damage inside your chest. Copper Center was barely a smudge of light in the wilderness. A small diner glowed warm yellow against the snow, its steamed windows fogged with stories and bacon grease. Across the road, two gas stations faced each other like gunfighters at high noon. The new Chevron blazed with LED lights, and truckers laughing over diesel fumes. Across from it, in the shadows, stood a smaller building with a half-dead neon sign flickering through the dark. Midnight Express. The letters blinked in and out of life one by one, until only mid and res burned dimly in the night. The place looked ancient. Its white paint blistered the windows, filmed with grime, and the metal pumps older than my father's stories. Something about it felt wrong, even from across the street, like a memory of a nightmare I hadn't had yet. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since Fairbanks. The diner's bell jingled as I stepped inside, and the smell of burnt coffee and fried eggs hit me like warmth after too much cold. Too much. The locals looked up from their booths, conversations dying mid-sentence as they took in the stranger. The waitress behind the counter had steel-gray hair and a scar that ran from her ear to the corner of her mouth. Her eyes were pale blue, sharp enough to cut through the noise. "Coffee?" she asked, already pouring. "Please." I slid onto a stool, hands still trembling from the drive. "I'm looking for work. Anything around here?" She studied me for a moment before answering. "Depends what you can do. Trucking company might take you if you've got a license. Logging if you don't mind losing fingers. But there's a place across the road. Midnight Express, they always need night help. Gas station." "Yeah." Her tone changed flat now, like she was warning me without saying it out loud. "You'd better be desperate." I gave a humorless laugh. "Guess I qualify." She wiped the counter slowly, eyes drifting toward the window, toward the flickering neon across the street. "Stick to the Chevron if you're smart, kid. The other one ain't right after dark." The scar on her cheek twitched when she said it, and for a moment I could swear the wind outside answered her just a low, hollow sound sliding beneath the diner door. But $800 doesn't last long, and I'd learned that fear was a luxury for people with options. I asked where to apply. She pointed toward a faded corkboard by the door, and there it was, a yellowed flyer hanging by one thumbtack. Night shift attendant needed. Midnight Express gas. $18 per hour. Reliable only. Draws normal and strange customers. Strange customers. The words itched in my brain as I copied the number. "You sure about this?" the waitress asked her reflection, warping in the window behind her. "I need the work." She refilled my cup without another word. "Your funeral, kid." Outside, the neon sign blinked twice, as if it had heard her. The Midnight Express lot crunched under my boots like old bones. Up close, the building looked worse than it had from the diner blistered paint, like scabbed skin windows clouded with a film that refused to be just dirt, and two ancient pumps standing in the wash of a flickering canopy light. A gust came off the highway and set the neon sign sputtering again. The letters tried to hold on, then failed, then tried again. A pickup eased out of the dark and slid to a stop by the front door. The man behind the wheel climbed out like his joints had learned discipline decades ago and never forgotten. Flannel shirt, pressed sharp gray stubble trimmed to the millimeter eyes that measured first and judged later. "Carl Morrison," he said, offering a hand that felt like dry rope. "No relation, I assume?" "Jake," I said. "Morrison, but no relation." "Good." He glanced past me at the highway like he was checking to make sure the world was still there. "You follow instructions, Jake." "Yes, sir." "Then maybe you'll make sunrise." He unlocked the door. The bell over the threshold made a small, wary sound like it regretted speaking. Inside smelled like dust-old coffee and something sweet that didn't belong here. Not candy, not air freshener, sweet the way lilies smell in funeral homes. The counter was a scarred plank of wood with a register that belonged in a museum. A humming cooler painted the floor in blue, and the fluorescent tubes above were the color of hospital hallways. Carl led me behind the counter to a cramped office with nothing on the walls but a phone and a steel door that could have come off a bank vault. The chair creaked under his weight as he opened a drawer and counted out 10 20s with a cashier's precision. "Advance on the week," he said. "You'll need supplies." The cash felt like heat in my hand. I tried not to look like someone who hadn't held that much in months. "There are rules," he said, and brought out a manila folder. The paper inside had been handled too many times. The edges were soft as cloth. He slid a single page toward me. 7. Read them, then I'll read them. They were typed on an old machine, the letters uneven, some struck too hard, some too light. 1. Keep all exterior lights on at all times. Replace burned bulbs immediately. 2. If you hear someone calling your name from outside between 200 and 300 a.m., ignore it. It is not a person. 3. If a child enters alone, do not acknowledge them. Continue working, and they will leave. 4. Never answer the store phone between 3:17 a.m. and 3:23 a.m., no matter how many times it rings. 5. If someone asks for directions to the old mining camp, tell them it burned down in 1987. 6. If a car pulls up with no one inside and the air gets hot, lock yourself in the office until the car goes away. 7. Only call me during emergencies. I read them once, then again. They didn't feel like jokes. They felt like sandbags tied to my ankles before wading into deep water. Carl read them back to me, slow, and even a drill sergeant's lullaby. When he finished, he set the paper down and looked at me like he was searching my face for the exact place where fear would take root. Questions I had 1,000. "No, sir." "Good. Stick to the rules, kid. They're your lifeline." He rose and gave me the tour, small as it was supply closet breaker box, a coffee maker that rattled like it had nerves. He showed me the pump authorizer toggle switches older than I was, and the slip drawer for cash. Everything ordinary, except for the thing sitting beside the register, a leather-bound logbook, its spine cracked and pages yellowed. Log everything he said. Sales incidents, anything unusual. That book's been here longer than I have. I flipped a few pages. Gas totals. Inventory counts. Then scattered like burrs in wool stranger lines in different hands. Child at 2:50 a.m. Ignored. Phone rang, 3:20 a.m. No answer. Hot air at 4 Hoosier locked office. Previous employees, I asked. Some. The way he said it closed the subject like a door. We circled back to the front. He paused at the glass, peering out at the canopy. One of the bulbs buzzed and flirted with darkness. "Rule 1, he said, as if the station itself had prompted him. "Bulbs are in the closet." "Don't wait." I nodded. He checked his watch, tugged his cuff down, and headed for the door. "I'll be back tomorrow night to check on you." He touched the bell as he passed beneath it. It made that same small sound like it hated to speak. "Remember, follow the rules exactly. They've kept me alive for 20 years." The door closed. His taillights dwindled. The parking lot's quiet, pressed up against the glass, until my own breathing began to sound like a problem. I checked the time. 9:45 p.m. The cooler hummed. Wind tested the windows. Somewhere far off, a truck's engine climbed a hill and disappeared into nothing. Rule 1 nagged at me. I found a replacement bulb in the closet and stepped into the October night. The cold hit hard, clean metallic, and the darkness beyond the station's glow felt absolute, like an ocean after sundown. I swapped the bulb with gloved hands that still went numb, then paused by pump 2. 4 grooves scored the metal casing parallel an inch apart, as neat as a signature. Cat-bear vandals. Too big for one, too small for the other, too purposeful for either. Back inside, the warmth felt like borrowed time. I opened the logbook to a fresh page and wrote with the stiff neatness of a kid on his first day of school. October 15th, 2025. 10:00 p.m. Jake Morrison. Starting shift. All lights operational. The letters looked small and lonely on the paper. I closed the book and took stock like I'd done in every crummy job before. This one candy-aligned chips faced coffee, begrudgingly fresh. If I could keep the night ordinary, maybe it would stay that way. At 10:30, an 18-wheeler hissed to a stop. The driver had calloused hands and a face arranged by long miles. He bought coffee and jerky, squinted at the shadows beyond the lights, and lowered his voice. "First night." "Yeah. Carl, give you the talk, the rules." He nodded once. "Follow them." He left like a man who knew the road had fewer lanes than it promised. Silence slid back across the linoleum. I tried to inventory the candy rack and found myself counting the same row 3 times. The fluorescent tubes sang their thin insect song. At 11:15, a woman in a Honda Civic pumped gas with her shoulders hunched, eyes flicking toward the dark. She paid in 20s that shook between her fingers. "This place creeps me out," she said to the counter, not to me, "just passing through." Thank God. Her taillights dwindled. The station settled again, the darkness outside pressed close enough to leave a print. At 11:30, I found the drawing. It was folded under the register construction paper, gone soft at the folds. Crayon marks cut heavy and deliberate, the station under its stuttering sign, the 2 pumps like teeth, and beyond the circle of light, a single figure colored so dark the paper had nearly torn. Arms too long, no face. At the bottom, in letters that wandered like a stagger, one word. Friend. My stomach tightened. I turned the paper over for a name. Nothing. The wax still felt new under my thumb, like someone had finished this, and slipped it where I'd find it. I slid it into the desk drawer and told myself what I had to tell myself. Kids draw weird things. Parents don't watch as closely as they should. The logbook pulled at the corner of my eye. I opened it, and the stranger lines I'd seen before began to outnumber the ordinary ones. Child drawing found under counter. Disposed of. Sarah March, 2024. Drawing appeared again. Same figure, same handwriting. Mike, June, 2024. Third drawing this month. Kids getting bolder. Tom, September 2024. The years on the margins changed. The handwriting changed. The figure did not. The word did not. Wind rose outside and made the canopy groan. One of the exterior lamps dove toward darkness and clawed back at the last second. My breath fogged a little when I leaned toward the window. The heater clanked like a man clearing his throat before bad news. At midnight, the phone rang. Reflex moved faster than memory. I snatched the receiver halfway to my ear and halted. Rule 4. Never answer between 3:17 and 3:23. Midnight wasn't forbidden. Midnight express gas. Static. Not the crisp kind that means a loose line, but the wet kind, like something breathing through broken reeds. I waited. The breathing went on for 10 seconds. The line died. I logged it, 12:00 a.m. Phone call, heavy breathing, no voice. Then I flipped back. 11:47 p.m. Strange call, breathing only. 12:15 a.m. No voice, wet sound. The entries spooled backward through years. Different hands, same note. I checked the canopy again. All lights held. Outside, the glow, the world failed to exist. The window didn't show darkness so much as a refusal to acknowledge anything beyond itself. At 12:45, the cooler's glass filmed in frost, from the inside delicate veins branching, fanning, then gathering into letters. Help! I opened the door in a stupid reflex, and the message broke apart into nothing. Cold air spilled onto my hands and bit down. I shut it and watched condensation chase itself in circles until it formed nothing at all. The logbook was already open to a page that said exactly what I'd seen. Frost patterns in cooler, looks like writing. Can't make out words. Another page months later, frost message getting clearer. Same word every time. Someone's trapped. I told myself those entries were artifacts of suggestion. I told myself I was tired. I told myself this was just another lonely job in a country full of them. Somewhere in the wind, my name moved. Jake. Not loud, not close, just sure of itself. I stood very still and listened to the glass. The clock hiccuped toward 1 a.m. and carried on. The rules on the counter looked small and stupid and absolutely necessary. I put my palm on them like a patient takes an oath. Then I went to make coffee I didn't need and counted the seconds it took for the machine to breathe. The night adjusted its weight. It found me. By 3 a.m., time had stopped feeling real. The second hand on the clock jerked like it was fighting through syrup. Every few minutes I'd check the logbook, just to remind myself I was still part of something measurable. Coffee gone cold, lights still humming, every bulb intact. Normal. That word meant everything now. But normal was a lie. The air inside the Midnight Express felt charged, like the world was waiting to exhale. Even the cooler's hum had changed pitch, lower, slower, like a voice holding its breath. The rules on the counter glared up at me in the dull blue light, and my eyes snagged on one line in particular. Rule 4. Never answer the phone between 3:17 a.m. and 3:23 a.m. I'd read it 100 times. 6 minutes that separated safe from something else. But as I sat there, a thought crept in. Why those minutes? What could possibly happen inside them that didn't happen outside them? At 3:15, the phone rang. It startled me so badly I almost dropped my pen. The sound was sharp in the dead air, too clear, too loud. I checked the clock again. 3:15, 2 minutes early. Safe. I picked up the receiver. Midnight Express gas. For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then breathing wet, heavy, and close. The same sound as before, but slower now, thicker, like someone trying to speak through water. Hello. The breathing broke into words distorted by distance and panic. My blood froze. It was my own voice. Can't get out. So cold. Help me. I nearly dropped the phone. The background noise matched perfectly, the cooler's low hum, the flickering buzz of the fluorescent lights, even the faint ticking of the wall clock. Whoever, or whatever was speaking, was somewhere that sounded exactly like where I was sitting. "Who is this?" I whispered. But the line had gone dead. The clock's second hand dragged itself toward 3:17. I stared at the phone, willing it not to ring again. It did. Once, then again and again, each ring louder than the last, until it filled the room, vibrating in my teeth and bones. The sound was wrong, too high, too shrill, like metal screaming. Rule 4. Never answer the store phone between 3 to 17 and 3:23 a.m. I clenched my fists and tried to focus on my breathing. 6 minutes. I just had to last 6 minutes. But the phone didn't stop. The sound drilled into my skull. I thought about ripping the cord from the wall. But what if that broke the rule? What if cutting it off was the same as answering? The lights flickered with every ring. The cooler's hum rose to a near scream. Frost exploded across the windows and spread like veins. The cash register blinked random numbers, dates, times, negative amounts. And behind all of it, somewhere beneath the noise, I could hear something else. Voices. Hundreds of them, whispering over one another, layering, until they became something like wind. Then, from deep within the static chorus, I heard one voice I knew. Carl's. "Don't answer it," said faint but certain. "You answer, you stay forever." 3:20 a.m. 3 minutes left. I pressed my palms over my ears, but it didn't matter. The sound wasn't just in the room anymore. It was inside my head. The voices grew louder, clearer, until I could make out words. "Help me! Help me! I'm still here! I'm still," the phone screamed one last time, and then silence. 3:23 a.m. Everything stopped. The lights steadied. The frost began to melt. The cash register's screen cleared. The cooler sighed like a lung finally emptying. I stayed frozen in my chair, staring at the phone as if it might start bleeding. 6 minutes. That's all it had taken to make the world come apart. When I finally picked up the pen, my hand shook so badly I could barely write. Chapter 17 to the 23. Phone rang continuously. Did not answer. Frost. Shadows moving. All normal now. Normal. At 3:55, I was still writing, when the temperature changed again, not the slow, creeping cold. From before, this was heat. Oppressive, heavy, the kind that sticks to your lungs. The air shimmered above the counter. I checked the thermostat, still reading 55 degrees, but sweat prickled across my neck. Then I heard it. An engine. It was faint at first, somewhere far out on the highway. A low hum, too smooth, too perfect. As it drew closer, the lights above the counter flickered in rhythm with the sound. I looked out the window. A black sedan rolled into the lot and stopped neatly at pump 2. Its headlights burned white, unblinking. The windows were tinted black. No one was inside. Rule 6. If a car pulls up with no one inside and the air gets hot, lock yourself in the office until the car goes away. I moved. Fast. The office door slammed shut behind me, and I threw the bolt. The steel vibrated with the hum of the running engine outside. I could hear the pump engage the rhythmic click of the fuel meter spinning. Someone or something was filling the tank. Then came the voices. Low at first, like distant thunder. dozens of them speaking in a language that hurt to hear. The air in the office thickened, pressing down on my chest. Sweat ran into my eyes, stinging. And then, over the noise, a knock. 3 slow, heavy knocks on the steel door. "Jake," a voice whispered. My voice. "Jake, open up. It's okay now. You can come out." I backed into the far corner, shaking my head. "Jake," it said again, softer now, almost tender. "It's Sarah. Please." The voice was perfect. I could see her face in my mind, every line, every detail, her hands reaching for me through the dark. But I remembered Carl's warning. Follow the rules exactly. The knob twisted. Metal squealed. "Jake." The voice fractured into a deep, guttural roar that didn't belong to any human throat. The heat surged again. I could smell burning rubber. Then silence. I waited, listening to the blood pounding in my ears. The temperature dropped. The engine outside faded. The world exhaled. When I finally cracked the door open, the air was cold again. The lot was empty. The car was gone. The pump's meter read 13 gallons. After the car, the station didn't return to normal so much as it pretended. The cooler hummed like it had a secret, the lights held steady, just a fraction too hard, and the clock's second hand resumed its lurching march, as if each tick had to be shoved into place. I wiped sweat from my forehead and found ash on my palm. I hadn't noticed it drifting down during the heat, soft gray specks melting against the linoleum like snow that had chosen the wrong season. I flipped the logbook open and wrote with a hand that was finally steady. 4:15 a.m. Empty car event. Locked office. Voices knocking. Pump 13.13 gallons. As the ink dried, the pages ahead seemed to ripple thin as skin. The older entries had begun to feel less like records and more like warnings scratched into a ship's hull from below the waterline. The station sighed. The wind crawled around the building like a tired animal looking for a place to bed down. For half an hour, the world stayed on its best behavior. I restocked counted checked lights and listened to every small sound until each one acquired its own personality. Somewhere out on the highway, a semi moaned past and didn't slow. A fox screamed in the distance, one of those uncanny human-adjacent sounds that makes you glad there's glass between you and the dark. At 5:00 a.m. the bell over the door chimed. He stood inside the threshold like he had grown there too, still too centered. A man in a coat that might have once been brown. Now it was the color of soot. His hair was gone, or maybe it was just singed to a fine black crust. Ash clung to him the way cold clings to a window. He lifted his chin, and I saw that his eyes reflected nothing. Not light, not me, not the world. "Directions," he said. His voice was gravel in a cement mixer. "To the old mining camp." Rule 5 rose like a reflex from somewhere deeper than thought. I didn't blink. It burned down in 1987. His head tilted too far a hinge that had forgotten where to stop. "Burned down," he repeated, trying the shape of the words like a new set of teeth. The corner of his mouth lifted and did not become a smile. Burned down. Smoke bled from his coat, thin at first, and then thicker as if the fabric were a wick. The station's air changed flavor. Charcoal melted plastic, and something sweet that made my stomach tremble. Faces shifted in the smoke as it coiled a miner's lamp, cracked goggles, a mouth open in a scream that arrived without sound. "We've been burning a long time," he said, stepping closer. The ash under his boots left gray commas on the linoleum. 38 winters. 38 thaws. "Do you know how long that is when you can't blink?" It burned down in 1987. The words were a lighthouse. I was not allowed to leave. He leaned across the counter. The heat didn't rise. It sank crawling down into my bones. His breath carried cinders. But I can still smell it. He raised his wrists slowly, palms up, and I saw the cuffs of his coat charred to lace, flaking away to show skin beneath that was the color of old wax left next to a fire. "Can you—" I didn't answer. Rule 5 didn't say to argue. It said to repeat. It burned down in 1987. He laughed, not a sound exactly, but a violent exhalation that knocked ash from his shoulders in slow motion. The smoke around him thickened and the faces inside it multiplied. 3, 7, a crowd. Their mouths worked like fish, desperate for a deeper ocean. "We didn't burn," he whispered. "We were eaten." The word fell like a tool dropped from a height. The station heard it. The cooler's hum staggered and found a darker note. The fluorescent tubes haloed the burned man in a dead hospital glow. It came up through the shafts. He said, voice falling to the pitch of confession. Not heat. Hunger. The pupils that were not there widened anyway. It swallowed the camp and left us in the edges. Ash curled off his knuckles and landed on the counter with a papery sound. He leaned closer still until the cold carried his shape across my face. "Come see," he said gently. "We need more voices where we are." It's so quiet between the screaming. It burned down in 1987. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the smoke collapsed back into his coat, as if someone had snapped a lid shut on it. He straightened, head tilting back to almost human. "Yes," he said, softer. "That's what you'll say." He turned and walked out each step, leaving a dim gray print that faded as it formed. The bell chimed his exit. He did not leave the boundary of the light. He stood there just outside the glass where he could watch. The ash on his shoulders rose and fell as if wind were trying to decide whether to own him. I wrote with a pen that sounded too loud. 5 Huzru a.m. Burned man requested directions to the mining camp. Gave proper response. Smoke manifested. He remains outside watching. The entries before mine began to align in my head like cut stones. 1988. We say fire because it's easier to live with than the truth. 2001. He will stand until dawn if you don't break. 2019. He asked why I lied and the smoke had hands. The station shifted. Not the temperature this time perspective. The windows no longer showed just the lot and the road. They showed layered reflections that didn't match the room behind me. In one pane, I saw the counter at a slightly different angle. In another, the office door too far left. In the glass over the cooler, my reflection stood with its head turned toward the door, even though I was looking straight at the register. At 5:30 a.m., the walls began to breathe. The linoleum rose in a slow ripple under my feet, then smoothed itself, embarrassed to have been seen. The ceiling sagged as if some enormous thing had exhaled onto it and withdrawn. The light over pump 1 flickered a pattern that might have been code if I had the key. Shapes gathered at the edges of the lot. The child in the pink parka head bowed beneath a hood, crusted with frost. 3 figures without faces, their silhouettes the way heat looks above asphalt. Farther out wore so many that the dark developed texture. They waited like reeds at the edge of an unseen lake. The burned man did not move. By 5:40, something had learned to wear a human shape. It tried on Carl's height first, then his gait, then his posture. I watched it assemble itself outside the door, a puppet wiring its own strings. When it stepped into the light, It wore his face well enough to fool the kind of person who doesn't count minutes. Knuckles rapped the glass. 3 slow, confident taps. Jake had said, through the door. Carl's voice. The cadence was perfect down to the lazy softening of consonants. Open up, son. Shift's over. I checked the clock. 5:47 a.m. Not yet. My chest felt like it had been stuffed with wire. Come on now. It continued peering in with exactly the patience of a man who had seen too much in 20 years to be surprised by anything. You did good. Let me in. It pressed a palm to the glass. I could see its reflection in the window and in the cooler door opposite, and in those twin worlds, the palm was not a palm. It was a fan of jointed lengths, too many knuckles angles that worked only when light wasn't watching. Open the door, Jake. The voice dropped the genial coat and reached for something deeper. My name stretched, became a wire pulled across a canyon. The windows hummed. Faint cracks crawled like frost at the edges of the panes. The fluorescents hiccuped and spit sparks like tiny comets that burned out before they could fall. I stepped back, every part of me wanting to run for the office and lock myself inside steel and habit. But Rule 6 was for the car. This wasn't the car. This needed a different weapon. Time. I counted seconds in my head, each one heavy as a stone in a pocket. The thing outside paced the door in a way that almost convinced the eye it was human. The burned man turned his head slowly, not toward me, but toward it, as if measuring the newcomer against something older than both of us. Headlights crested the highway, not the surgical white of the empty sedan, a warm, imperfect yellow. Tires hissed on gravel. A car door thumped shut. Footsteps. A young voice, real because it didn't try to be. Hey, he called. You okay in there? Your lights are... Wow. The thing wearing Carl's face went still. Then it blurred at the edges like a painting caught in rain. The features slid, faltered, and peeled away into the morning that wasn't quite morning yet. The silhouettes in the dark thinned, the child's hood lifted without hands, and the little figure pulled backward into the wind like a kite cut loose. 5:08 a.m. I could feel dawn arriving, the way you feel someone step into an elevator with you, pressure changing the smallest shift in the math of the air. The door opened, and the college kid who worked mornings leaned in, backpack slung, eyes wide. Dude, he said, taking in the dead bulbs, the spiderweb of cracks, the thin, ash-like bad confetti on the counter. Rough night, I put the keys in his hand like I was passing a relay baton on the last steps of a race I hadn't trained for. He looked at me like I was the ghost. 6:00 a.m. The clock clicked into day. The burned man outside unstitched himself from the light and vanished into the place the station keeps for the hours when people believe nothing is watching them. The bell over the door sounded relieved to hear a normal human voice again. I wasn't sure I remembered how to make one. I signed the totals, closed the logbook, and took one last look at the rules. They didn't look like rules anymore. They looked like names on a wall. I stepped outside into the thin, honest cold and breathed air that hadn't been in a building's lungs all night. The sky over the Richardson Highway was gray as steel shavings. Somewhere beyond the spruce, a sun I couldn't see was making decisions about the day. I got into the Subaru and turned the key. The engine coughed, considered, and caught. Behind the glass, the station watched the way sleeping things watch when they are pretending. The highway unfurled before me like an old scar silver under the weak light of dawn. Frost still clung to the shoulders of the road, glittering like tiny knives, as the sun fought its way through a curtain of low clouds. Behind me, Midnight Express gas was already shrinking in the rearview mirror, a ghost of a building sitting alone in the gray wilderness pretending to be nothing more than another roadside station. I didn't look back again. The Subaru's engine wheezed steady but tired. The dashboard clock read 6:37 a.m. I drove with both hands on the wheel, gripping it so tight that my knuckles ached, as if letting go might let something from that place crawl back in. The world outside felt too quiet. No trucks, no wind, not even birds. Just the tires hissing over the asphalt, and the whisper of my breath fogging the windshield. For a long time I told myself I was just cold. But deep down I knew the chill in my bones wasn't from the air. The silence had followed me, the kind that breathes when you stop listening. By the time I reached Anchorage, the daylight had burned off the frost, but not the unease. I found a motel that smelled of old smoke and bleach, paid cash, and slept for 16 straight hours. When I woke, the world felt slightly tilted, like I'd stepped out of one story and into another that didn't quite fit. I turned on the TV, craving noise, human voices, anything. A local news channel flickered to life. The anchor's tone was neutral in that practiced professional way. Early morning fire consumed an abandoned gas station near Copper Center, she said. Authorities believe faulty wiring may be to blame. No injuries reported. The property has been condemned. I sat there, remote in hand, staring at the headline, Midnight Express Gas Destroyed in Mystery Blaze. No survivors, no witnesses, no mention of Carl, no mention of me. I should have felt relief. Instead, the back of my neck prickled, like I was still being watched. I told myself it was over the rules, the voices, the burned man, the whispers through the phone. The station was gone. But even then, part of me knew that wasn't true. Because the world doesn't just lose a place like that. It shifts it, moves it somewhere new, waiting for another desperate soul who needs money more than peace. 6 months later, I was living in Seattle. A job at an auto shop, a small apartment with thin walls and noisy neighbors, the perfect kind of normal. I was scrolling job listings one night, more out of habit than need, when I saw it. Night shift gas attendant needed. Remote location. 18 hour. Must be reliable and follow instructions exactly. The posting had no company name, no location. Just a phone number. For a full minute I stared at it. The exact same words, even the punctuation. I could almost hear Carl's voice, steady, calm, the way he'd said, "Follow the rules exactly." They've kept me alive for 20 years. I closed the laptop and turned off the lights. But sleep didn't come easy. Because sometimes when the world goes still in those dark hours before dawn, I can swear I hear the faint buzz of fluorescent lights and the hum of a cooler whispering a rhythm I'll never forget. The desert remembers. The snow remembers. The silence always does. And if you ever find yourself driving a lonely highway in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, Arizona, it doesn't matter, and you see an old gas station with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign, do yourself a favor. Keep driving. Don't stop. Don't look at the windows. Don't listen when the night says your name. Because some places aren't meant to be visited. They're meant to wait. If this story kept you up tonight, if you've ever stopped at a lonely gas station and felt like someone or something was watching from the edge of the light, tell me in the comments below. Would you take a job like that if it paid enough? Share this story if you've ever experienced something paranormal yourself. Subscribe if you believe some places never truly burn, they just wait to be found again.